The following podcast contains subject matter that may be unsuitable for more sensible viewers. Views expressed here do not reflect that of any community that you would want to be a part of. Listener discretion is mandatory. Mama, what does trans mean?
No! Okay, I guess we'll get going now. Hello, hi, welcome to Tranifesto. You all know this song and dance by now. Hi, I'm Madeline
What
Hops.
if we have new listeners, Madeline?
That's true. Okay, yeah, let's try that again then. Hi, and welcome back to Tranifesto. Yes, Tranifesto, or where I
Welcome
learned to
back.
stop
They're
worrying.
new listeners. They're not coming back.
Oh my
This
god,
is their first
welcome
time.
here for the first time to Tranifesto.
Thank
Fuck off.
you. There we
How
go.
are they
Yes.
gonna, they're not going to know the narrative. They're not going to know,
Okay.
like, there's been so much character development since the first episode.
Are trans.
This show is called Tranifesto. It's a podcast.
Yes.
Podcast is...
This is an auditory medium. I have a face for podcasting. That's why I do this.
So
It's
you're
sort of like
listening to
radio for
something and
losers.
the sounds are, like, vibrating the bones inside of your
A lot
oral
like your
canal.
Hitachi. Yeah.
Oral
And-
canal.
Yeah. It's ear fucking, basically. So welcome to the ear fucking. I'm one of your hosts, Madeline Hops. I am joined today by...
I'm Amy.
And I'm Ree.
Hello,
Yeah,
Amy and Ree.
That's us.
So, yes, welcome to the show. If this is your first time, I'm sorry for the horrible life decision you've made to listen into this. If you're a repeat customer, then you already know what you're getting into, so fuck you. Just
You
kidding, I
fucking
love you
slut.
so much.
Just keep coming back for more, don't you?
Yeah, you like it.
You never saw
Just
it.
listen. You like it. I know you do.
You dirty horse. All right, so... oh, fuck.
You love
so
it.
Yeah, so this week, we have decided to go over... I'm actually very excited for this week, personally. Regardless of queer cinema, this is actually one of my favorite movies of all time, period. So
It's
I'm
a
really
very
glad...
nice movie.
Yeah.
Which is a nice departure from the last two.
Yeah, we definitely needed to recover from the last two because he's an Ace Ventura. So yeah, this week we're going over the 1999 satirical comedy, But I'm a Cheerleader. Also, this is very interesting. This is going to be our first movie where we focus on queerness as a whole, kind of stepping away from transness for a bit. We do want to get
talking
into
about
larger...
sexuality.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important, like, we... in our...
Sexuality.
If any of you are into ASMR, this is about putting a penis in somebody's butt. And so... So, yeah, we want to, as a show, kind of move on to queerness as a whole where we can. So this will be our first one focusing mostly on sexuality. Lesbianism is a pretty big part of the show.
It's the main part of the show.
Yeah, it's pretty well. No, there's gayness in all forms in this. But before we get
truly
into
is.
it, there's a lot of stuff. Before we get into it, though, Amy's gonna do a quick synopsis, just kind of bring everyone up to speed and see where we're at.
Right, yeah. So our main character is played by Natasha Lyonne, who, now that I've seen Russian Doll, this movie has a certain strangeness to it.
Is she getting typecast as a lesbian, by the way? Because she was a lesbian in Orange is the New Black as well.
Oh, she absolutely is being typecast as a lesbian. I don't know if she is a lesbian. I don't know anything about her as an actress, but that certainly is.
There are worse things to get typecast as.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So the main character, played by Natasha Lyonne, is Megan, who is a cheerleader and a repressed homosexual. She has a boyfriend, but she hates kissing him, and her locker is full of pictures of women, and she fantasizes about all the girls on her cheerleading team. The worst.
As you do.
Deep in that compulsory heterosexuality. And her friends and family stage an intervention with the help of the True Directions gay conversion therapy camp,
Vaginas Anonymous.
where they confront her with the fact that she's a lesbian, even though she doesn't know that she's a lesbian, and send her off to a camp to turn her into a good old straight girl. At the camp, they try to convert her into the life of heterosexual bliss of housewifedom, by teaching her traditional gender norms and roles and presentation and performance and trying to teach her how to love men. And they also do the same thing for the gay boys who are also sent there. But at the camp, there are all these gay girls around her for the first time. And she falls in love with one of them, Graham, who is fantastic and smokes cigarettes inside and no one seems to care. We stan.
Yeah, we stan.
And so she starts falling for Graham. All the girls and some of the dudes go off to like a gay club with the help of Lloyd and Larry Morgan, who we'll get into. And eventually she and Graham get caught like making out, having sex by a dirty, snitchy goth.
All goths are narcs.
Megan gets kicked out of camp and her parents sort of leave her to her own devices because they don't want her to come back home.
They don't want
Whereas
to bring
Graham
the gay
decides
inside.
to try to complete the therapy and convert to heterosexuality by having sex with the camp leader's simulated
Performative sex,
sexual
yeah.
relationship with the camp leader's son, who's like a super gay boy.
So fucking
But
gay. And they're
at
dressed
the
up as
end-
Adam and Eve, too.
You know, Megan disrupts the ceremony at graduation with an adorable cheer in which she asks Graham to be with her, and they run away together to live their best happy gay life.
And everybody cries.
Yes, we cried. I
actually
cried.
did cry.
Yeah, I
I
actually
cried
did
too.
cry.
I cried multiple times.
Yeah, no, this one hit unexpectedly hard.
Yeah, like I said, this is one of my favorite movies of all time, period. I'm still trying to debate whether this is my favorite piece of queer cinema I've ever watched, but it still certainly has like an incredibly special place in my heart. Again, just before we get into the dissection of queerness in this, as a movie, though, it is beautiful. Like, the cinematography on it is absolutely amazing. All the stuff is like bright, solid colors.
Well, it's all
but
these like
all-
muted pastels as well.
Yeah, and also
it
too,
has a really nice aesthetic.
this has tied for probably one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard in a movie. In terms of just all the tracks on there, Stereo Total is on the soundtrack, which is one of my favorite. Well, the band I love. I would say this is tied with Josie and the Pussycats movie in terms of soundtrack, but that is a discussion for another day.
Can we do Josie as an episode for Josie? It's like it's not queer at all, but it's perfect.
It is. It's such a good movie. That and Spice World, but we'll get to those later.
Yes.
I know Spice World, right?
So good.
It's so good. But yeah, like it's just the framing of all the shots in terms of like how weird everything is, like how the faces are kind of zoomed in, everything. Like there's not a boring shot in this movie. It's literally everything is framed like a picture perfectly. And yeah, in terms of it just aesthetics and appreciating it from a filmmaker standpoint, it's absolutely amazing.
Agreed.
Cool.
Agreed.
All right, so diving into it now, the meat of the whole subject. Conversion therapy is one of the things that comes up that Amy mentioned. There's
Yeah,
an
sort of the
intervention stage.
central plot element of the film is
Yeah.
her being sent off to this gay conversion therapy camp where they try to turn her straight through all sorts of either disgusting or bizarre or absurd or offensive procedures and lessons.
Nothing so dark as real conversion therapy, and I don't know if like
No,
you think
absolutely.
that-
It certainly does whitewash the experience.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
no,
if you wanted to like point out a problem with it, that's definitely
Yeah, which I
Yeah.
mean, like, it's also too like it's. I would also argue that that's an okay omission in the context of this film, simply because
It's trying to satirize it.
exactly like it's not meant like obviously there could be much more. There's tons of serious documentaries on gay conversion camps. Also, a little odd known fact: allegedly, some of my family actually ran a gay conversion camp in Canada, so that's awesome. I know,
Yikes.
right? Yeah,
you're canceled.
that-
You're canceled by association.
Well, also too, there's also the association that I have with Jordan Peterson, which is another thing.
that's another story for another day.
Yeah, I am somewhat related. Anyways, but the whole idea of just like, I like the fact that it was softened. I like the fact this was done as a comedy. Obviously, gay conversion is a lot more traumatizing and terrible than that. But I think it was a good medium to kind of introduce the ridiculousness of it.
Yeah, exactly. It focuses on its absurdity.
Yeah.
And part of that, like, if you want, I can go through the steps.
Yeah,
because
please.
part of the movie is that as the film progresses, they go through different stages of the conversion therapy process, and all of them have their own sort of ideas and absurdities.
Yeah, because there was step one.
Which was admitting you are a homosexual. It's like, the first step of fixing your problem is admitting you have a problem.
Exactly.
And so they all have to come to terms with their problem. Even the ones who didn't think that they were gay when they came, like Megan. Even the ones who, in fact, are straight, like Jan, for instance.
Well, and the part I really like too is the idea that in a world where you wouldn't have problems with people's sexual orientation, let's just say it was a non-issue. The idea is that it was through the social pressure of outside forces that she came to believe that that was an isolated thing to her, and also that it was wrong. Because, like, beforehand, she's like, well, everyone has these thoughts. That's perfectly normal. And that's a really healthy outlook in terms of sexuality, at least from my perspective. It's just, like, it really shouldn't matter. And she was just like, oh, I'm just happy thinking of this. And everyone's like, no, it's wrong, it's wrong. And, like, it's through that societal pressure that it becomes wrong. The act of it just feels natural to a person.
Yeah, and like the process of step one for her, at least, was very traumatic. She was not only forced to confront that she was different, but that she was wrong.
Yeah.
And she has like a full-on meltdown about it in front of everybody while everyone happily applauds.
Well, even when when they first confront her and say she's going to a gay camp, like, they're even bringing up like ridiculous things where it's like, oh, you have this on your wall, you're trying to make us eat this tofu and you're a vegetarian.
Oh yeah.
which is very funny, which is a very big mood, like, in my family, which is like,
like they knew she was.
Yeah, they don't have a problem with, like, my sexuality or my gender identity. It's just whenever I try to, like, order off the vegetarian menu, that's the only time that they have a problem.
Or the part where I think it was like RuPaul mentioned, because RuPaul's in this as well.
Playing a straight or like the main counselor.
No,
what
close. I myself was once a gay. Now I'm an ex-gay.
Which is funny because, like, I am not crazy about Drag Race, but I love everything that RuPaul is in, like, as an actor.
Yeah, totally. And he also had that
RuPaul
part
should
where
just act and not be RuPaul.
Like, have you ever watched Girl Boss?
No.
That's like, it's one of my favorite Netflix shows, and he plays like the super gay roommate or like landlord in that. But just every time I see him pop up in anything, and he has like this weird post-punk new wave music career from before Drag Race, like, it's just Drag Race that I don't like.
Oh,
and
that's
his opinions about transness.
Oh yes, that is. Yeah. We'll get into that, but for the sake of this movie, exactly. He's a wonderful camp counselor. And, like, the whole idea
he's,
of
like,
just
super gay but repressed because he's like a gay conversion camp, and
he's also
failing to teach all these boys masculinity because he has none of it himself.
Yeah. Also, too, I like the fact when they're like, and I know it's like not overly subtle, but the fact, like, with all the boys, when all, like, because all their stations are all gendered and stuff, and the boy stuff is like, there's two bolts and a screwdriver, but they're organized to look like just dicks all over the place.
Yeah.
Fucking not subtle but hilarious. Yeah, no, I think the whole idea of just having to admit that you're gay is probably one of the most upsetting things, because you don't want to have to think of yourself as different. Yeah, like, it's just like you are who you are. It was
made into this very negative thing.
Well, I mean, like, the biggest hurdle in transitioning is getting to the point of, like, getting past the point of self-denial, and, like, despite what people who think that, like, trenders are a thing, like, one of the hardest parts is say to yourself, this is what I am, and now I have to go through the whole process of living that.
Yeah. Okay. So step 2 is rediscovering your gender identity.
Interesting choice of words.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's interesting. And that sort of speaks to a broad misequation that this movie, well, not this movie, but the camp in this movie makes between gender presentation and gender identity and sexuality. So step 2 for the girls is basically housewife training. Lots of vacuuming and sweeping and washing dishes and learning how to keep a home and be a domestic, docile, subservient woman. Because the assumption is that lesbianism comes from some kind of disconnection from the roles of womanhood.
Yeah, like, at one point, of the status quo.
Yeah, like Megan says to Graham, women have roles, and if you recognize that, you would stop objectifying them, which is what they're trying to teach them, basically. It's this, like, fucked up idea that gender roles enforce sexuality.
Well, and it's also the nice thing too, because it, like, for the hets that maybe have seen that film and we're seeing it kind of like as like their first piece of queer cinema, it was also nice because it showed that, like, the whole idea of heterosexuality also stymies you in heterosexuality, because like just because you are a woman doesn't mean you have to do these things. But in the context of this movie, it's like if you are this gender, you have to do this.
Which is almost like when I first
Yeah.
heard like that line, like, you know, once you just accept that that gender is this, then you can stop like being like objectifying people. It's like a very like sort of turfy thing where it's like the self-contradictory like vision
Yeah.
of like what women are supposed to be. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yeah, it's like almost like pretending to be
Which,
feminist,
I mean, people
using a
do,
language
like,
of
weaponize,
objectification.
like, especially people who are very regressive, weaponize feminism, like, literally all the time. Like, literally everybody, like, especially, every
That's what Turks
female
do.
conservative is either explicitly anti-feminist or, like, saying that, like, oh, I am being feminist by being a good trad wife.
Yeah, being feminist by standing up to the regressive left and their embrace
Being
of,
a
like,
feminist
like,
by
regressive
outlawing
values
abortion.
and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's also, too, like, the interesting thing that they fail to
Yeah.
realize it's just a choice to be whatever the fuck you want. You can be a trad wife, or you can shave the fucking side of your head and be the new Goro in Mortal Kombat 11, who looks amazing.
Yeah, and I think that we could talk a bit more about that misequation between gender identity and sexuality, since it sort of fits in here. Like Jan, for instance, is this character who is like extremely masculine. She's got her head shaved except for like a short mohawk and has like a mustache and sort of is very, very masc. But partway through the movie, she realizes she was never gay. You know, she fucking loves men. So Jan says, like, in her realization that she was straight the whole time, she says, I just want a big fat wiener up my... And then one of the gay boys says, amen, sister. Because she realizes that, like, just because she was masculine, she was sort of typecast in people's minds as gay and sent to this conversion therapy, and she was like convinced to say she was gay in step one, but she was never gay.
Which is,
you know, she was just masculine.
it's kind of interesting to like also bring that to trans people, is that there is a big, what's the word? Like there are thoughts around masculine trans women, and like, you know, different people, and like sort of people either have like true scummy opinions about that or turfy opinions about that or like whatever. And this is an example of, you know, a extremely butch, because originally, actually, when I saw this, I wasn't sure if that because I just forgot about that character, and I thought that she was presenting as a like trans guy. I thought that was the angle that they were going to take with that. And when she said, "Oh, I'm not gay," I thought it might be like, "Oh, yeah, I'm not gay because I'm actually a man." Like the way that they took it is interesting, because it's also like just a way that you don't think about women as being.
Yeah, it's just like a radical. Like, hey, you can be like incredibly mouse to the point where you are ambiguous in presentation,
and not in like a sort of not
girl.
like in a cultivated androgynous way, just in like a hairy, unkept like jock sort of way.
And I think it was really interesting how the movie subverted that. Another sort of other angle of that is like Megan is like super femme. You know, like she really did not need that much help in the whole rediscovering her gender identity thing. She's a cheerleader. She wears her hair all nice and pretty and curly every day.
Yeah, she's the stereotypical like good blonde girl, and you know that was kind of the archetype that was she just kind of slid into because she didn't know any other way. She was like the lipstick lesbian without knowing she was a lesbian.
Yeah, but like her gender identity was never at fault.
Yeah,
like it's really hard to imagine that it was, and yet they still forced her to like sweep the floor a bunch.
Yeah, I think what it was like, I think the movie presenting the idea that like all of this is bullshit in terms of like the role. Like it's like women, I like even like taking away from queerness for a second. I think in terms of it was just saying like just because you're a woman or man doesn't mean that you have to be one way. You can be lots of different ways, and it still makes you how you identify.
Yeah.
Like sorry, I keep forgetting her name, but the girl with the shaved mohawk,
Jen.
So she basically she liked men. It was regardless, even though she was butch, she liked men. So the aesthetic of it was still irrelevant to her orientation.
So step 3 is family therapy. And this is where we sort of experience the family dynamics that led all these kids to be in this fucked up situation and sort of implicitly criticize them.
I think it did a really good job of calling out the parents being ridiculous about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it was also too, like, was it that scene in which they did the whole root cause? I think it was that scene because the parents got called out.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so the root cause, so this was something else that we wanted to get into, but the root cause theory is something that's existed since the gay panic, which the idea is that you're gay because something happened.
It's very
kind of
Freudian.
trauma. It's Freudian. It
It's
literally
very
has
Freudian.
its roots in Freud.
And so they in the scene with the family sitting around, they discuss what their root was. Like, and they had to make, and like the kids had to like make up. It's like, oh, I saw or something happened, and it's because of this.
Yeah, and it's like most of them probably were just making it up. Certainly Megan was, because Megan
Yeah.
had no idea, because Megan doesn't have a fucking root, because
Yeah.
she's just a lesbian. That's okay.
Exactly. Yeah, and hers was something like, it was an old one. This is an old stereotype. I can't believe to say this is old stereotype. I remember when these were like brand new. But
She
the
said
whole
what
idea,
the counselor wanted to hear.
exactly, which was the idea is that the father was emasculated because he was out of work, and therefore because they did not adhere to the roles.
Yeah.
She no longer respects men, so therefore she doesn't respect, she doesn't respect her father, therefore she doesn't respect men and views them
Yeah.
as sexually viable.
Well, I mean, the other one was like, my mom got married in pants, so which is kind of
yeah.
the same thing, but even more
That was very good.
ridiculous.
Yeah, that was hilarious. Well, again, it does a good job of using comedy to relay actual, because people believe this shit for the longest time. They're just like, you're gay because of something that happened with the mother, overbearing mother.
One
or
of them
something.
was like, I grew up in France.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Well, one thing that reminds me of is like, I think it was on the last season of BoJack Horseman. There's like a flashback to BoJack getting
Sad
like,
horse.
yeah, where he gets picked up by his dad, who's like a shitty like misogynist guy, and like talking about like, oh, I'm getting I'm picking you up, like, I'm doing the women's role, so I hope you're not getting any ideas about gender. When you grow up to be a homo, I don't want you to be prancing out on the stage in pearls singing a song called "My Daddy Made Me a Fairy." Like,
Oh, fuck. I gotta watch that show.
it's so good.
It's
The
true,
horse
though.
program.
The sad horse for sad people.
He's a horse who has the problem of a man. Like,
Yeah.
what's not to love?
So,
It's Seabiscuit on antidepressants.
yes, and they like call out. So it's like Megan sort of says, like, at one point, like, my dad was out of work for a while and my mom sort of picked up the slack, and I kind of saw her as this masculine figure. And the counselor jumps up on that and is like, oh, that's perfect. So you, when you saw your father emasculated, realized that you were no longer able to respect him, and thus were no longer able to respect men, and fully identified with your mother's masculinity. And your father is just sitting there, like, looking so broken and miserable and emasculated and crestfallen.
Which is, he has a bit of a redemption at the end there, but we'll get to that. But yeah, no, I always hate these conversations in terms of just like something happened in your life that made you become like this. It's so fucking annoying and unoriginal.
Oh, God, yeah.
It's just like, I didn't choose to become trans. I was this way, and it just happened to be how things
Which
go.
there are interesting conversations and thoughts to be had of like, where did the first manifestations of my feelings come from? Like, what things did I originally associate with my feelings before I understood what they were? Like, these are interesting conversations, but
Yeah.
it's the way that these can be, if you view either an atypical gender identity or sexual identity as a problem, then it completely retextualize what that self-exploration is.
Yeah, and I mean, too, like, I remember I don't know for you guys, but, like, for me, I remember my first thought in terms of, like, gender dysphoria was I saw moms. Like, and I remember I was very little, and I was like, I wanted to be a mom, and I always thought, that's a weird thought. I can't be a mom. Why would I think that? And so I would, like, when it comes to child education, stuff like that, I would love to see more LGBTQ stuff in the system, just because, like, that would have been great for me to know. It's like, oh yeah, you can have these thoughts. They can be normal for a guy, or they could also be this. It's like, oh, well, that's nice to know.
There's also Graham's parents. They're these, like, super bougie, white, cranky, conservative people who are like,
Oh yeah.
you gotta get this gay shit sorted or else you're not gonna get your trust fund and you're not gonna get to go to college and
Well, it's
this and that.
and with all the parents too, it's the same kind of fear that all the kids had, which is just like, they will not be loved if they are gay. And so
Yeah,
the
and-
kids feel they have to become not gay in order, because I mean, like, it's scary if you're a kid looking up and like losing your parents, especially at a certain age. Like, that's like,
It's shockingly scary.
yeah.
And like it's not just like an imagined threat for them, it's a literal threat for them. Like Megan's parents literally sit her down and say, if you don't get this shit sorted out, you're gone.
Yeah, and it's scary at any age too. Like, it fucking doesn't matter if you're like, but it's
Yeah.
especially scary if you're a teenager and you have nothing
And
else.
you're fully dependent on them, yeah.
Yeah, because
I mean,
what the
like,
hell
that's
do
your
you do?
family.
Yeah, which, again, I don't know if this is going to be in the next point, but that leads to the Gay Support Network, or the Gay Underground Railroad.
Yes, let's talk about this here. So,
Gay Railroad.
Lloyd and Larry Morgenborgen and the Underground Homo Railroad.
The gay Harriet Tubmans.
Gay Harriet Tubmans. So, Larry and Lloyd Morgenborgen are ex-graduates of the...
Were they graduates or were they employees?
Something like that. It's unclear. I'm not
related
sure.
to.
But yeah, so they are now living their best gay life together, off in a shack nearby, and run this amazing program where they go to each class of this camp and sneak them out at night to go to like a gay club,
which is so good,
to like expose them to their other options and say, hey, you know, you can have a family in the queer community, you know, this you can embrace this and still live a happy life.
Yeah, that was actually really heartwarming for me, because that was actually one of the, and this is why the movie has a special place in my heart, is seeing that support. And just like, because there's, especially for like trans youth who get kicked out and they have to be, you know, it's usually like, you know, older or established queers that take them in so that we can help and get them back to where they have to go.
Sometimes in an unfortunate grooming way, but
that's a we'll focus on the positive for now. But you're absolutely right.
Focus on the positive.
Yeah. But it's a good disclaimer. But yeah, like I felt it was very sweet. Even their dynamic in terms of like they had that one fight in front of the kids at one point in time.
That adorable fight in
but
the
it was very post relationship therapy. Like,
yeah, exactly. I acknowledge your feelings, but I'm still upset.
I am listening to your truth, and I am seeing you are entering your victim zone.
Yeah, it was so good. It was so sweet. They were just the cutest couple. And that moment too, where like, because I think one of the guys, Lair Bear, they calls him Lair Bear.
Yeah,
it was very sweet. But yeah,
where's my Lair Bear?
Oh, so cute. But yeah, the Underground Homo Railroad was kind of a nice concept, and honestly did exist. And like, it's a very good kind of remnant of like the I mean, pre-yes, but also post-Stonewall time, where it was just like the idea of other established gays just basically living to help take care of other...
aid, like networks of mutual aid and chosen family, and this idea of community as filling in the gaps of a society that doesn't accept you, or...
Which is kind of an interesting consequence of like the liberalization and like the like slow acceptance of gayness, because now it is easier to be a queer person like in regular society, but it's still alienating, but it's almost easy enough that you don't need to go build a community.
And so you don't have the community, but you're still on some sense in the margins.
I guess it depends on who you are, and I assume that like people either out in small towns or people of color, or you know, people in certain religious situations, like obviously that's
varying
different
degrees of marginalization.
Like especially like I know in the Midwest in the States, like that's still a big thing in terms of just like actual support groups. But keep in mind, like back in like 99, when the internet and social media was just starting to kind of kick off, those groups and knowing where those individual groups were was imperative. Like you didn't have a lot of readily accessible message boards that you could go to, and like nowadays you can post on Twitter. Like we have, like there was hashtag crowdfunding, trans crowdfunding not too long ago. So there's ways to connect online. Like we have, I have my online chosen family that I spend lots of time with, and they mean the world to me. Hi, I love you too.
I don't believe in the internet.
I guess
friends.
I'm not just online.
No, exactly. I know you IRL. But if anybody else is listening and we talk on Twitter, I love you. But it's like
don't parasocial me. Please parasocial me.
But it's also it's imperative that we also remember that this stuff is still going on. It's just transformed into a way now where it's much more direct. On Twitter, I can put out if I'm a trans kid, and usually they get picked up pretty quickly and helped. But we also have organizations, like established funded organizations now, which allows individuals to have the resources from a community in that regard, rather than just like the one-offs in the rainbow-colored house.
Although you still need a rainbow-colored house.
You do need a rainbow-colored house.
Go find a rainbow-colored house, do drugs in it, get sloppy drunk in it, have bad sex in it, figure out that your label for your identity was the wrong label and start using a different label, and then leave and never go back.
And this has been Amy's guide to transition. For all of us. So make sure you follow her for the latest tips.
Find a colorful house to make mistakes in.
Exactly. Be the colorful house you want to see in the world.
Make it my house, baby. So, step 4 is demystifying the opposite sex, in which you are basically supposed to expose yourself to the positive aspects of the opposite sex and try to begin to view them through a sexual and romantic lens. They do this by like forcing them to spend time together and talk to each other and shit.
Because and this is kind of one of those myths again, where it's the situation that you're not attracted to the opposite sex simply because you don't understand them, which is again a very tropey thing. And are
you sending fucking
sorry, if we're
Ben
all
Shapiro
memes pausing right now, it's because
right
Reese
now.
fucking sending memes. What did you just send us? It's Cortez, I am ugly, and then Ben Sharpie going, objectively speaking, you are gorgeous, and then Cortez going, but I don't feel gorgeous. And then Ben going, facts don't care about your feelings. Why are you sending this to us now? Holy shit.
I really wish you were committed to the podcast, but clearly...
I appreciate your shit posting, but
I can listen and shit post at the same time.
we can't. Jesus fucking Christ.
Anyways.
Yes. So anyway,
yes, fucking Reed's bullshit.
Step 4 kind of lies in this misconception that the reason you're not attracted to the opposite sex is because you have been insufficiently exposed to them, or you have built up bad associations with them, versus you just aren't into that.
And I think they even try doing like some romantic stuff. They like pair the boys and girls off and just like, okay, well, try to understand, try to understand, like have like a simulated date. I think that was the best way to put it. And it was just awkward.
Yeah.
And like the boy, I think at some point in time, the boys were like looking at each other over the shoulders and like kind of waving at each other.
Well, this entire thing, it's intercut with these montage scenes, which are the like which are used as a catalyst for like the main characters and like all of the characters to become more romantically attracted to each other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also that scene too where the two boys get caught in the office upstairs canoodling, which is interesting because it was an interesting scene because in order to fend off impure thoughts, the girls, I don't know, I assume it's the same for the boys, but are given like a small taser. So if they touch themselves...
Oh, yeah, I love the taser.
Yeah, I know. It's
And the goth girl who loves pain.
Yeah, exactly.
That's one of the things she says when she introduces herself. She spends like every night, all night, just shocking herself and moaning.
Yeah, which we've
it's
all
aversion
been
therapy
there.
when you have a...
Yeah, she's like, what are you doing? Aversion therapy?
Yeah.
When you have an impure thought, you shock yourself to associate the impure thought with pain. But she's like really into pain, and so it just leads to this endless cycle.
Yeah, but the interesting thing was when the cheerleader basically like went into the office and started masturbating, which also too as a side note, very interesting because I cannot think of a lot of movies with female masturbation. Like I just obviously them porn, but
Sure.
like just like that kind of like it wasn't overly glorified. It was basically her discovering herself in that first
it wasn't
moment.
like super sexualized weirdly.
That's actually something I wanted to get into. Like maybe we should have said like during the aesthetic stuff. But one thing this movie does really well that I don't think I've ever seen in anything else is that it's very sexual, but it is able to be very sexual, but as like the lesbian gaze without just making it repurposing male gaze. Which is
exactly.
It's such a subtle difference, but it's obviously like femme for femme like attraction rather than male gaze, which is like it's interesting to think of how that is an aesthetically different thing.
Well, and I love it, and it's like it also made me like feel like the worst thing in my life now is that I wasn't a lesbian teenager in the 90s. But it is very like female gazy, and I guess that was like that's a very good point. I actually hadn't thought of it that way because like to me it was oddly erotic, not in like a
think about think about the sex scene. Think about how that sex scene between Graham and the main character was
Megan.
How that was shot.
It was not a porno. It was like this emotional cinematic. Like it cut a lot, and it was very vague and very much from the perspective of one of the girls.
And the hands going over each other was just like the whole experience.
Sensual, not
that's a very good way.
pornographic.
Yeah, sensual over sexual, and I absolutely loved it for that reason.
Yeah, it would have, and even like when she's like fantasizing about like the women in her like inner life,
cheerleading cadre.
It's hard to imagine how, but it would have been different if it was directed and produced by a heterosexual man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think it was.
Wait,
it was made by a dude.
Was
No,
it?
no, the director was female.
Oh, really?
I
Yeah.
didn't look.
Oh shit. Well, that's awesome then. No wonder it ruled. All right, cool.
Yeah, no, I looked this up. Hold on.
Directed by
Yeah, Jamie Babbitt, who's a lesbian.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no, then they picked. Then okay, so now that that's come to light, I did not think about this before because I did not know this, but this is
she's directed episodes of Russian Doll.
so this is actually one of the fact that there is a lesbian woman directing this film is now that I know this is something that I really want to drive the point home. We all agreed that the way that it was shot was perfect in terms of just like lesbian focus, the lesbian gaze on the female body. Mm-hmm. And this is why it's important to have people who are part of a group that you're trying to represent involved in the project heavily. Because, like Reese said...
Because it really shows in subtle ways.
Yeah, because Reese said, if this was directed by a guy, it would be very different. And I agree. It would probably be a lot more pornographic, there probably would have been a shower scene, if we're being honest. Whereas this is all about, coming of age, discovering your body, and then also discovering how that body feels for other people, is done in a way that was focusing mostly on sensuality rather than sexuality. And I think that's the big difference in terms of the two gazes.
Right, so the final stage of their conversion therapy process is, simulated sexual relationship, which is really where we get into the fact that the camp leader, or the main counselor, I forget what her name is, her son is Rock. Her son Rock is fantastically gay.
Yeah, and there's an implied thing
gay.
between Rock and RuPaul's character, the entire
RuPaul.
Yeah.
And so Rock is just shockingly gay, and the camp counselor basically assigns all the girls to have simulated sex with Rock, and through this she's basically trying to convert Rock, her son, into being straight, by this weird and uncomfortable and awkward and at times almost perverse exploitation of these kids' bodies. It's just, and it's absurd, they have these bodysuits and leaves taped over their genitals. It's really quite something.
Yeah, and it's the whole idea too. Again with tropes of what people need to do to be cured of being gay. The idea is you just haven't had good sex. It's no. I mean, to be fair, that sex with Rock wasn't exactly what I would call.
No, at one point, the counselor says, "Real men don't do foreplay. Real men get in there and get out quick."
Which, for any men listening to the show, please fix that. That's
how you do it.
Yeah, no, just hit it and quit it. Don't hit us, please.
We love that.
And don't quit me. Stop quitting me.
I like
but
it
also,
when you quit me.
that's the part that probably gets the closest to the actual shittiness of a conversion therapy, because that's the point where you as a viewer are the most uncomfortable.
Yeah, and again, this movie wasn't meant to be serious, so obviously it wasn't going to go dark. It was meant to be lighthearted. But yeah, that moment, you just sit there, everyone's watching, no one feels comfortable with this. And that one, and the one the head of the camp, she's just excellent. It's oh god.
Yeah, and it really drives home the fact that these camps are trying to manipulate and control the sexualities of teenagers. And, obviously that's what they are, but it does this really effective confrontation with that fact by really sort of having this absurd scene where it happens so plainly.
Which is weird because it does imply that this Rock character is an adult.
Yeah, that too. How the fuck old is Rock?
Yeah, all of these characters are 17, 16-ish.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is kind of I would say one critical part I have, which is just because there's some people, there's a moment where RuPaul's character is underneath a car showing the boys how to fix it, and he's there's exaggerated thrusting of the hips, and all the boys are staring at him. That has to be at least a 10-year age gap there.
I mean, yeah, it's complicated because it's when I was a young gay boy.
When I was a
your
young
father
warthog,
took you into the city to see the Pride Parade.
Never happened.
He said, "Son, Will, you grow up."
I certainly was not exactly concerned of an age gap in the people I was into.
That's true.
Yeah, it is just, it's interesting to see the dynamic depicted, which I think in the way that this is done, it's the sexuality is like, it's like kids are going, like not kids, like the teenagers are going to like sexually objectify older people like anyway. It's just like there was mainly the part where it was Rock being the sexual, like the direct sexual like liaison to these teenagers. Like that's where it got like uncomfortable for me.
And actually, it's interesting.
Gross.
It's interesting now that you mentioned that too, because I just realized that it was always the younger boys looking up to the older guy. Which again, we can understand. Like if you're young and watching porn, you're gonna watch older people anyways. The older, like RuPaul's character, never sexualized himself towards the younger boys, so I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. No, the dynamic of the older guys was between RuPaul and Rock.
Yeah.
They had this weird tension that they never explored, as far as I could tell.
Which is a shame, because there's such a great world of traditional pederasty that they could have explored. Just traditional gayness, like the fucking,
they're both of age.
like our Athenian forefathers demanded.
Jesus.
So all of this culminates towards the end of the movie, in which the cheerleader ends up getting kicked out because of her philanderings with Graham, and because she's ratted out by the goth. So the number one rule here is don't trust goths.
Fucking goth.
Yeah.
Don't trust the goth.
All goths are narcs.
Honest goths are just emos. Graham's character goes on with the rehab, does the sexual simulation, which again, uncomfortable. I hated it. And there's like a graduation ceremony at the very end where it's graduating as being straight. And this wonderful moment, and I think this is the moment that we all teared up on, is the cheerleader comes back and she ends up doing a cheer professing her love for Graham. And it is just, it's so fucking sweet and cheesy. And I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I cried.
And then they literally run away together.
It's so good.
Oh my
It
god.
was so sweet.
You know what, honestly, I would not...
No, I wasn't expecting to cry. And also, like, part of my brain was like, this cheer is really, like, awkward, and all these people are watching her, and she's being sort of quiet about it. But it was so sweet that my emotional response overwhelmed that.
Yeah, and also, too, the... it's interesting, because I don't know if either of you played the game Gone Home, but, like, there's a lot of parallels between that relationship dynamic in that game, and turned into the lesbianism.
I heard that game brought socialism to the gaming world and tried to destroy man.
Oh,
Yeah, no,
absolutely.
it did.
Lesbian walking simulators are going to get Bernie Sanders elected and destroy America.
Venezuela invented lesbian walking simulators.
But yeah, no, it was a great way to end the movie, which is just like kind of run off into the sunset, which again, perfect because it's a farcical movie. I don't really need much of an explanation in terms
They
of...
were so sweet together.
It was
because
so-
it was like their dynamic was interesting because for a lot of the movie, Graham was trying to convince Megan that all this conversion shit was bullshit and she should just be herself and, you know, get through this for her own sake. But like this wasn't gonna like make her straight, and to try to embrace that, you know, she like pressured her to come out to the club with them and have fun, and she made out with her and they had this cute romance. But in the end, it actually turned out to be Megan who fully committed to being a gay, whereas Graham decided to try to finish the program, and Megan came and said, you know, all that stuff you said about embracing who you are, I want you to do that with me.
Yeah.
And
Oh, it's so
it was
good.
sweet.
Yeah, it made me cry too, because I remember when I first had a boyfriend when I was younger, and like the reason we broke up is because I was too scared to come out. So like I watch moments like that and I'm just like, oh, all right, well, I love it, and it's so fucking heartwarming and vomit-inducing wonderfulness that I fucking love. So all in all, like, yeah.
You know when you date a boy after you transition and you realize that you just graduated into being straight again?
The cycle continues. Perfect. So, I think
All the other bi girls just cancelled me.
If you're a straight trans woman, you're a class traitor. Real take I have seen.
if you're a straight woman, come on the pod and explain yourself. The last part too, and the one last thing I want to mention about this film is the cool like ending, where it's just as kind of a nice filmmaking come around. The parents end up going to a gay straight alliance meeting, and it's the father who goes up front and says that like, you know, hello, my name is so and so, my daughter's gay. Very much in the parallel to when the daughter had to come out in the Homosexuals Anonymous
Yeah.
meeting. And the interesting thing of like the dad being there and trying to be supportive whereas the mom's just like
They
super
came
ashamed.
around.
Yeah,
At least a little bit, they came around.
and it's all it is. Like, I mean, there is a
It's like a Marvel style after credits scene too.
yeah. There was actually I was reading this article online the other day in terms of transition, and it was saying that, like, you know, this is one person's opinion. Is like, give your family members after you come out a year to be shitty and get everything out of your system, and then after the year decide
Fuck
what.
that.
Yeah, well,
A year.
exactly. But, like, I get the idea. What the timing is, whatever. But the idea of just, like, there is a time period where people are going to be shitty, and then you should also give them an opportunity to get better. And so a year, yes, I agree, that's a little too long. But, you know, the parents, they have to then go on their journey, which is to accept their daughter for who she is and realize there's nothing wrong with it.
Overcome all their own bullshit. Go through
Yeah.
their own conversion therapy.
Exactly, because that's the other thing too. Is just like, and for cishet allies, it's not just the fact of like accepting people for who they are. I kind of dislike that line, because there's an implication that you're liking someone regardless of a negative trait. Whereas if you love someone for who they are, then there's nothing wrong, and you shouldn't view it anything inherently wrong with the way that they are, be it gay, lesbian, bi, trans, anything. So, obviously, I know my thoughts on this movie as it is. I kind of let it be known at the beginning of it. But is this good representation? Is this something you'd want to show to your cishet friends? Whichever one of you wants to take it away.
Yes. And
This movie's
yes.
perfect.
Yeah, I would agree that this is actually probably the first movie. If someone came up to me and be like, "Hey, I want to,"
Unequivocal. Like, it has some little issues.
yeah,
but
little things here and there.
I love it.
Like the hyper gayness of some of the male characters, but even then, I think it's a good thing to show with your friends or family, like the first time. So like if anybody came up to me and said, "Hey, what's a good movie to, like, you know, what would you recommend?" I would honestly say this movie, because unlike Rocky Horror, this one is actually a bit more about like understanding things in a real world, and also like for the hets to see themselves maybe in a different light from their views if it's a negative view. And then plus two, again, the soundtrack, I cannot get over it. It's so good. I've been listening to it on repeat since I saw this movie yesterday. And also too, just the idea of just, it's something that we can all laugh and enjoy together, because that's one of the things that I want to see more in queer cinema, is comedy that we can all enjoy together through universal themes, but also being represented fairly.
Yeah. Well, like, obviously I love this movie so much, but the way that it plays the conversion therapy as a foil to create some jokes and to create something light out of is really interesting, because I was thinking about the idea of doing a satirical take on something so dark, and I was thinking that my first exposure to conversion therapy as an idea was, do you remember the South Park episode about conversion therapy?
No, I don't really watch South Park.
I never watched South Park.
Well, I watched it a lot back when I was a kid, and there was one where like Butters gets sent to a conversion therapy, which again, it's South Park, so it's a satire, but it's like really dark, and kids are constantly killing themselves, and it's just like the entire time it's like the kids are like, "Oh, I'm so happy, I'm so glad to be like to be coming straight," and then like next time you see the kid is gone because the kid killed himself in between the two scenes, like, and that's like a one way to take it if you are going to like create a satirical look at it, and this is like the complete opposite, to like play up the absurdity rather than the darkness.
Yeah, because I mean, like, you can absolutely, and again, there's been lots of examples of the dangers, and everyone's pretty well versed on what the dangers of conversion therapy are. It's sometimes humor is the medium that helps the medicine go down, which is that, you know, it makes it easier to swallow. Sometimes it's like you want to watch something like this as opposed to like a documentary on the actual lives and impacts, because we all know conversion therapy is just awful, especially to kids. Like, it's terrible. So I like the idea that they took the satirical look through the eyes of gay conversion therapy, because you can start to laugh at it.
And it gave the kids a happy ending.
Exactly, yeah, which is what I wanted. This is like, there's a lot of fluff to this movie, and that's perfect. Like, it's exactly what I wanted. And it's a feel-good movie, and it doesn't matter how many times I watch this, it's always going to be probably one of my top 3 favorite movies of all time.
Oh, and Madeline, I wanted to chat to see if you also felt this, because when we're, like I said, especially the scenes where all of the like characters are talking, and they try to get like one of every type of gay in there, and it reminded me of the outpatient clinic from after getting bottom surgery.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right? Where you're like in like an old house with like one of every single different type of gay.
It's so true. I remember getting out there. Like, I remember my roommate was like this really high femme Korean girl who just like had this amazingly high-pitched voice and played like League of Legends the entire time we were there. In one of my friends that I met there was like this hippy-dippy chick named Tara. And then there was like another time, like I went downstairs and there was an older trans woman there. And I walked into the living room where she was meeting her, I assume her wife. I think that was what she said. And I turn around and there's two other trans women sitting with collars and cat ears. And apparently they were the pets. So like I said, one of every type of trans
so
person
good.
there. Yeah.
Oh, we're such a stereotype.
Oh, it's so good. So yeah, thank you all again for joining us. As always, it's been a pleasure. The show has been going on for a couple episodes now. Thank you all again so much. Also, too, some housekeeping stuff. Thank you very much to the people that actually donated recently to the show. Your donations have meant the world to us. I was
We love you.
It was great. Like, we're almost at a place now where I can pay for a year of hosting through donations alone, which is amazing, and I cannot thank you all enough. I cried when the money came in and I got the note. So thank you again so much for that. To all the people that retweet us, the horror podcast community that somehow we're friends with, we absolutely fucking love you people. And just, yeah, everybody, you've been absolutely sweet. All the messages we get. This project was supposed to just start off as a drinking show between all of us just to have a good laugh, and it's ended up becoming something more.
It still is that.
It is. I've moved on to weed, but it is. And so, yeah, thank you all again for that. Also, too, we are working on the Patreon stuff, the Discord server's being looked into, as well as, I'll break this on here, we've started sending in for some samples for some merch that we're looking into, for Patreon rewards, which we're very excited about, and if all goes well, then in the next month or two, we'll have everything up, and we'll have some giveaways for everybody, which I'm super, super stoked on. Yeah, I think that's about it, so... To close off, as always, I'm Madeline Hops. I am rabbit_is_dead at Twitter. I'm just mostly working on the podcast these days, making sure things are where they need to get to, and finalizing my move.
I'm Amy at Lavender Ashtray on Twitter. I just finished my semester, so I am feeling enormous relief, and I'm about to go on a romantically motivated adventure to Amsterdam.
Oh,
so
go get fucked!
Good time. Thanks. So I'm doing well. I won't be around much or saying much on Twitter, but doing well over here.
And I'm Ree Carter. It's Ree Carter on Twitter, RHICARTER. And I have a video game out. It's called Echo Royale, and it's like Flappy Bird, except it's multiplayer, and it's going to be on... By now it should be on Android and Steam, and on Steam it only costs $1, so you should go get it. So look up either Echo Royale or my studio Dead Genre, and you should find it, and it's all vaporwave, and it's fun, and we're really proud of it. So that's what I have going on.
And I'm so proud of you. I don't know if I say this enough, but I am actually really proud of you for getting that game out. It's amazing, and the work, yeah, the work that y'all have put into it is fantastic. Love you to pieces.
Thanks.
No problem. That is a moment of gay brought to you by us. So yeah, as always, just because it's bad doesn't mean it isn't good. And thanks again for joining us. We'll see you all again in 2 weeks. And enjoy. We'll love you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.